that the church is the people. In fact, a lot of times kids learn that in Sunday school. Learn the church is not the building. The church is what? The church is the people. We are the church. And we understand that as the church, it's made up of all sorts of different people with all sorts of different backgrounds. And that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. The fact that we're all able to come together here from such a diverse background of experiences and thoughts and everything else, we can come together and be one. That's awesome. That's what's wonderful about the church. In fact, the early church, one of the big controversies was, how can you get Jew and Gentile to get along? And they were able to work it through. Now, there was challenges along the way, but yet they were able to make it happen. But being that the church is made up of people, and the church is all sorts of different people, the issue with that is people sometimes have problems, right? We get that. You can't have any group of people together in one place and not have problems. It's going to happen because every single individual is different, and if you're supposed to get along, you're going to be butting heads along the way. We know that. We understand that. However, a lot of the New Testament is about that topic, unity. It's about taking a diverse group of people who have a bunch of issues and problems, who struggle with sin, who have all sorts of things they're working through, and yet they're supposed to come together in the church and be one, be united. We know that in our families too, right? Families all have diverse backgrounds and experiences, yet we're supposed to be one family. On a sports team, we're supposed to be one team. In your workplace, you're supposed to be one company, yet the church is also a diverse group, but yet we're supposed to be unified. We're supposed to be one church. But how are we going to do that? We got different backgrounds. We got different nationalities. We got different religious preferences. We got different scriptural interpretations. We got different approaches to life. We got different attitudes. We got different personalities. We got different ways of talking. We got different ways of dressing, and yet we're told to be one. How are we going to do that? Now, humans have tried to solve this problem a lot throughout history. In the Bible, you come across a group of people called the Pharisees. They were some religious leaders in Judaism at that time. They would force a lot of, I would say, opinions on people as doctrine, as a way to try to create unity through uniformity. What they would try to do was, okay, if we could just tell everybody to do everything exactly the same, we will legislate every single part of your life. Everything down to what you wear, to how you wash the dishes, literally, how you wash the dishes. They would try to create unity through uniformity. If we could just make everybody exactly the same, then we will be united. Now, you can do that, but that's not real unity. That's kind of fake unity. It's kind of putting on a show. It's kind of this idea of where now you become very judgmental of everybody else, because if you don't do everything exactly the same as I do and act exactly the same and have the same opinions as I do, then you're not promoting unity. Well, that's not real unity. That's uniformity. You can force that. I mean, you can have school uniforms, right? But it doesn't mean kids aren't going to still be in gangs, right? It just goes, well, we all dress the same. They're not going to. It doesn't work always like that. Uniformity is not the same as unity. So how are we going to do that then? Because the Bible doesn't expect uniformity. You have Jews and you have Gentiles in the church in Colossae, and Paul doesn't tell them, all right, everybody be exactly the same. We have groups of people today to do that, right? Where everybody dresses exactly the same, cuts their hair exactly the same, says the exact same words, eats the exact same food. We usually call those cults, right? We don't want to be that. That's not unity. You can force that. You can make that happen. But is that the unity that's talked about in Scripture? What we're going to see in the book of Colossians this morning is that the church does need to be united. We must build ourselves up in unity in spite of being full of very different people. But the way we are going to create that unity is not by forced uniformity, but it's by something deeper and better and more effective. Let me show you what Paul says then. Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 12, and this is the passage that Richard read for us. Let's walk through this together, and we will learn from it. If you didn't see too, when you came in the foyer, I should have announced that I failed in that regard. I actually have a handout today with blanks that you can fill in. So if you want to sneak out to the bathroom and grab one, you can. If you want to get one afterwards as a review to see how much you remember, go ahead and do that too. But there are some handouts on the music stand in the foyer. But let's look together. Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 12, it says this. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. Paul is telling the Colossian church, here's how you're going to get along. Here's how you're going to be united. You are God's chosen people. You are the church. You need to have a heart full of compassion. And if you have a heart full of compassion, you'll have kindness. You'll be nice to each other. If you have a heart full of compassion, you will have humility. You won't think you're better than everybody else. If you have a heart full of compassion, you'll be meek. You won't always force your way. And if you have a heart full of compassion, you will have patience towards your brothers and sisters. How in the world are different people going to get along? By doing those things right there. You have a bunch of people with a bunch of different opinions and a bunch of different backgrounds, but if we can all just be kind to each other, we can have unity. If we'll all realize it's not all about us, that we're not better than everybody else, that my viewpoint isn't always the best and everybody's else's viewpoint is wrong, you'll have unity. If we don't go around thinking I have to strong arm my way into control and get what I want to happen, if we're meek, if we're patient, if we let people grow at their own rate, then we can have unity. Let's keep reading though. He goes on. He says, put on then, after this, he says, God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Now in yellow on the screen, he says, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. Let's think about how practical this is from a unity standpoint. First off, if you're kind, humble, meek, and patient, it'll be a lot easier for you to have unity. And if you have that compassionate heart, when things get rough, you'll bear with one another. I'll put that in my own speak. You'll put up with each other. In the church, you're going to have people at times that annoy you. You're going to have people that bug you. You're going to have people that rub you the wrong way. You're going to have people that offend you. We have that in our families. We have that in our sports teams. We have that at the job. And what do? Sometimes we put up with it, right? In fact, Paul tells the Colossian church, bear with one another, and even when you're upset with each other, forgive. He literally tells you that when everybody else annoys you, forgive them. If you want me to put that in a modern way of looking at it, Paul says, suck it up, be kind, be meek, and when people bug you, let it go. That's how we can create unity. Well, that's not real unity because I disagree with them. You can disagree with them and still have unity. Yeah, but they offended me. You can forgive them. But I don't want to forgive them. They made me upset. Paul says, why? Well, the Lord forgave you. The Lord forgave you for your sins. That's why you should get along. Think about how practical this is. This is such a cool passage when it comes to how we can make the church work. And notice, the way you make the church work isn't from regimented rules of forcing everybody into your way of doing things. It's not the way you do it. It's not, well, I'm going to manipulate. No. I'm going to threaten you. No. It is, I'm going to be meek, kind, patient, humble. And when I feel like I'm wronged, I'm going to forgive. That's so much more powerful. It's hard. It takes work. It's not easy to do. Uniformity is almost easier. You know, Bible camp is easy because we have a rule book. And I can say, well, you have to dress that way because it's the dress code. Or you have to go to bed at this time because it's in the schedule. But that's not how life works across everything. And that's not how things work in the church. Because the church is made up of all sorts of different people that didn't all sign the same waiver. So you can't make them all do the same thing. Right? We have to treat people a certain way. We have to create that unity through forgiveness, through patience, through tolerance. Through this next point, he says, through love. He says, and above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Notice how this is all from the inside out, that we create that unity, how we can create that oneness. And don't just think this is about the church, too. If you're having disunity in your family, it's solved this way, too. If you're having disunity on the job, it's solved this way. In your sports team, in your school, it's solved the same way with these same principles. Unity is created in all places the same way. But here he says, above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together. Anybody know what that is? What's that called? Anyone? Come on. Linchpin. It's a linchpin. A linchpin holds together items. You know, a cotter pin does similar, different kinds of clips and so on. But a linchpin holds together like a hub or a bunch of units. Here's a picture of linchpins being used in a hitch on a car. I think I don't know what I'm looking at there. It looks like the undercarriage of something. We see some heavy equipment, a gate. A linchpin holds everything together. It's not the most ornate part of a piece of equipment. You really wouldn't notice it unless it wasn't there. You know what I mean? If your trailer pops off the ball hitch, then you realize that it wasn't there, that kind of thing. But that one pin binds everything, holds everything together in unified fashion. I think it was Seth Godin wrote a book called Linchpin, where he talks about being a linchpin in a corporation. About you need to become that person that holds everything together. That way you're indispensable and they don't fire you. But that's how it works here with unity. Love becomes this linchpin by which you hold everything together. The church is held together with love. And like that linchpin and heavy equipment, that love holds the building of Christ, the church, together. How are we going to be united? Love each other. In a family, as long as you have a foundation of unselfish Christian agape love for one another, you'll work through the hard stuff. The difficulties, the differences, the disagreements, you will be able to work through if everybody approaches it with that kind of love. Now, when people aren't meek, aren't kind, aren't loving, aren't patient, well, yeah, don't have compassionate hearts, love doesn't prevail and it falls apart. But if we can have love be that linchpin in the church, we will be able to work everything together and have that unity. Paul then illustrates it another way here in this passage. And in my opinion, it gets pretty cool right here. Let's read verse 15. He says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, which indeed you are called to one body, and be thankful." And then he goes into verse 16 talking about songs. What he does is he takes that linchpin binding together illustration, and then he takes it another way. He goes, let me illustrate this a different way. The way we're going to work together in the church is allow harmony to form through that love. We sing songs here in church for the most part that follow kind of the way of four-part harmony. I'm not an expert on music. I don't know how that all works. I know there's various types of music. In fact, four-part harmony, I understand, is actually only a few centuries old. But anyway, this four-part harmony, you have like soprano, you have alto, tenor, and bass. And together, when those different parts are sung, we harmonize with one another. It sounds pretty. It comes together. It's one voice, one sound, that kind of thought. Paul is going to show us here that our love in the church creates metaphorically harmony. Let's keep reading. He says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which you are indeed called in one body, and be thankful." He's going to show us that if you have Christ in your heart, you're going to have harmony within the church. Christ in the heart and love in the heart will change how we talk to one another. There's another word for that, by the way. When you change the way you talk to one another, we call that something. In fact, this is the big critique that people have of text messaging. They say the problem with text messages is you can't tell the what? The tone. Now, there's ways that you have a really aggressive period or something like that in there. But for the most part, we lose tone. Paul is going to show us in this passage that in order to create harmony, which is unity, We have to change the way we talk, which is our tone by which we talk to one another. I think he's making a really cool music illustration here, is what he's doing. He's taking something that's kind of just common sense. Change your tone, create harmony, work together. But it's how we're going to have unity. If you have love for one another and you're communicating with people in your family and you use an aggressive tone, are you going to get along? No. In fact, if one of my kids say something to me in a room, I say, hey, watch your tone. How we talk to each other is a reflection of our love for one another. So even in the church, if you had Jewish Christians over here looking down upon the Gentile Christians and saying, oh, look who showed up. Even in the church, Jewish Gentile Christians are making fun of the Jewish Christians over here, and they're talking to them in a negative way. Paul comes in and says, no, guys, let the rule of Christ dwell in your heart. Let the love of Christ be in you. Be kind, be loving, be forgiving, be patient. Change how you talk to one another. And if you do that, the church will have unity. Then look at verse 16. Here's how it all makes sense. This is why he mentions singing here. He says, let the word of Christ richly dwell in you, or dwell in you richly. Change what's in your heart. Let the word of Christ dwell in your heart. And when you talk to one another, when you teach and admonish one another, do it in all wisdom with singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. You don't talk to one another rudely, but it's like you sing to one another with thankfulness in your hearts to God. That's how we have a harmonious congregation. That's how we have a harmonious home. That's how we have unity in the church. When we, instead of rebuking each other harshly, with a rude tone talking down to one another, with an impatient spirit, with an arrogant attitude, if we change the way we interact with each other, it'll be as if we're teaching each other in song. That's pleasant. That's harmony. You know, a lot of times we jump to this verse to talk about singing in the church, and we rob it from its context. This is so much bigger than just, here's a verse that says why we sing. No, this is talking about being unified, being together, getting along, being patient, kind, and tolerant, and loving and forgiving. That's what this passage is all about. He's saying when the word of Christ, thankfulness, is in us, we'll be able to admonish each other, which if we have the wrong tone, you can't do that. But if you have love for one another, you can even admonish, correct somebody in harmonious song instead of argumentative disunity. When you love somebody and they know you love them and they know you care about them and you're kind toward them and you're always patient and meek and humble toward them, you can actually correct them in a way that's well received. You can correct them in a way as if you're just singing a song with them. That's the harmony we have in the church. But here's what we normally do. We don't like somebody, we get angry at somebody, so then we tell them what to do and we get angry when they don't listen. Well, that's not harmony. That's not unity. But unity in the church can happen when we're all speaking that same voice, not saying the same thing, but speaking with the same tone. The tone of love, kindness, forgiveness, and patience. If we do that, then we'll have unity. If we do that, then we'll have harmony. If Jesus is in our hearts, we'll change how we treat and talk to one another. And love will become that linchpin that holds the church together. Yes, the church is made of a whole bunch of different people. And people have problems, and people have disagreements, and people have differences. But if we treat people right, with kindness, love, and forgiveness, if we change our tone with one another, we can take that church that's made up of people with all sorts of different problems, and we can create unity if we love each other, treat each other with kindness and patience. Unity is possible. Now, it might not be easy. Being patient with somebody, that's hard. Always having a kind tone when you're offended is hard. Being meek when you know you're right is hard. Letting someone else get their way when your way's better, that's hard. Being kind when you've had a bad day, that's hard. But if you want a strong marriage, that's what you're going to do. If you want a happy family, that's what you're going to do. If you want a positive work environment, that's what you're going to do. And if you want to have a church that's united, that can take people from all different backgrounds and be a light to this community, when people look at us and go, wow, how in the world do you guys get along the way you do? We can say, it's because we love one another and we forgive one another, just as Christ loved and forgives us. If we do that, we will be a blessed people. We will live blessed lives, and we will be a blessed church. The lesson is yours this morning. Let's be kind, patient, and loving, and let's create unity wherever we go. But right now, let's all stand and sing the song that was selected.